great honor to have as our guest Mr. Mehmet Ouçu, who is a distinguished former Turkish diplomat and international expert on energy and geopolitics. He is, of course, the chairman of the Middle East Institute in Washington, D.C. He served as a Turkish diplomat in Beijing, in Brussels, in Paris, and you were, Mr. Ouçu, also advisor of former Turkish Prime Minister Turgút్ Oζάλ, who is well known in Greece. Everybody knows him. And you are so many things, senior executive at the International Energy IEA, in many different foundations. So again, we welcome you. And of course, I cannot avoid to ask you what is happening in Turkey. We saw yesterday incredible photos and videos from the headquarters of CHP with riots, the police, Mr. Ožēl trying to remain there. What does this mean? I mean, the cancellation of the 38th Congress of CHP, Mr. Ouçu, for Turkish democracy and for Turkish policy.
Well, I mean, it is quite unfortunate what we see today in Turkey with the main opposition party, also the founding party of the Republic of Turkey, 1923. And right now, I think we are in the middle of a judicial case, which is, legally speaking, might be correct, but politically, it is quite regretful because this party is right now Turkey's largest party in terms of their vote capacity. We have seen this in the latest public opinion polls. And it is also the main challenger to the existing ruling party. Because the problem is we are going to have a new presidential election in 2028, normally speaking. However, if it is going to be taking place in 2028 as scheduled, President Erdogan will not be able to run for the third term, constitutionally speaking. Therefore, right now, if they organize an early election, Erdogan will be able to run for the third time. But the economic, political situation, foreign and security policy issues at hand are not so favorable to Erdogan. Therefore, he might lose it. And the intention is to have the election as early as possible. We call it lightning election, a rush to election. And then the main challenger to Erdogan, the mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, is right now in jail for alleged crimes and corruption and also falsification of documents. But many people realize that these are not the real accusations against him. What matters is he is a strong political challenger to Erdogan. Therefore, he has to be put under the behind the doors so that he will not challenge him. And the same goes for his party, CHP. As I said, this is the founding party of the Republic, and it is in the forehead of all other challengers, including the government party. Therefore, what we see now, there is sort of a division within the party. One wing of the party, which lost the election,
Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, we should say that
he wants to make a comeback.
Who yesterday called the police to enter with violence in the headquarters of CHP, which is totally crazy, to kick out Mr. Ožēl, which is something that you couldn't expect for Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, who till now had a political, we could say, diplomacy, something like that. So why there is so much anger? Why there is so much division? And what will happen if Turkey will go to elections, to early elections this year? Will CHP will be divided to these elections? Will Mr. Ožēl and İmamoğlu create their own party? What will happen?
Well, the party has already been divided between the followers of Kılıçdaroğlu and also Özgür Özel and Ekrem İmamoğlu acting together. And I think this judicial decision is just a pretext to make sure that opposition is divided. If there is going to be an early election, President Erdogan probably thinks that this is going to work in his favor, while he's going through serious economic, political, and security difficulties at home and abroad. And probably it is right time right now to call for an early election, because if he stays until 2028, when it is due, probably economic vulnerabilities will be much higher and heavier than today. And if the opposition is disintegrating, divided among themselves, there's a likelihood of that he might perhaps win the election opportunistic. However legitimate, however legal it's going to be is another question, of course.
So do you believe that democracy has ended with this act of cancellation in Turkey that wants to get rid of the main candidate of opposition? In fact, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, along with Mr. Erdogan, want to get rid of Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu and to be sure that he will not be the candidate. So do you believe that this act that has never happened in Turkish till now, and maybe never in the world, means that you have to face the end of democracy in a more official way, or not?
Well, clearly, Kılıçdaroğlu is not acting on his own, because someone who lost elections, 13 elections during his term in office, and also lost election to Erdogan, because he insists that he will himself will be the candidate rather than İmamoğlu or Mansur Yavaş or another candidate which has a higher chance of being elected. Therefore, now coming back and to replace again Özgür Özel in a legal coup, and I don't think it's going to work. People in Turkey are very smart. They will recognize this. Even in the ranks of AK Party and other right-wing parties, they realize that what happened yesterday and before to discredit CHP and its leaders will backfire. It's not going to work.
So do you believe that?
So you should believe. We believe in the roots of the democracy, deeply rooted democracy in Turkey, and people will make the decision, right decision, whatever the government, judiciary, and executive and parliament will be doing.
So do you believe that the people and the Dem party, which is a pro-Kurdish party that always is the crucial party in the elections, who will support at the last moment, they will support CHP for this political coup, as you said? And because we saw that when at the first round of elections of the very first time that Mr. Ekrem İmamoğlu was elected in 2018, and Mr. Erdogan cancelled the first round, then at the second round, Mr. İmamoğlu was elected with more votes, which means that the Turkish voters reacted to that coup at that time. So do you believe that if tomorrow Turkey was going to held the elections, CHP, no matter who would be its candidate, would win, or with Kılıçdaroğlu not? And if Mr. Ozel will create a new party, who is a new rising political star, we must say, then he could be the winner against Mr. Erdogan.
Well, I don't think that Özgür Özel is going to found another party, new party. He said all along from the very beginning that CHP is his home and where he is going to struggle. If the headquarters of the party will be occupied by Kılıçdaroğlu, he said no problem. Because when CHP was founded back in 1923, it was founded in a small room within the parliament. And we'll do the same thing. We will be in the squares and also in the parliament. And I have every confidence that the Turkish voters will act in a very responsible and civil manner. And this act is going to be punished by the electorate, definitely. Irrespective of CHP, AK Party, and other opposition parties, because what has been done is a gross violation of Turkey's political traditions. And people recognize that it's not only a legal case, it's a political case against İmamoğlu, Özgür Özel. And therefore, if there is a fair, transparent election taking place early or in time, I think Turkish electorate will make the sound decision, because This ruling party has been in power almost quarter a century, and they have done good jobs, good deeds as well. But now what we came to is not acceptable in any civilized society. So people will make their right judgment.
So we will not talk about the politics, but there is a huge political scene in Turkey. There is a Bilgi University closure, another.
But they reopen it. They
I know,
opened the
I know, I
university.
know, I know. So because
I wrote a piece about it.
Because I talk with
immediately
academics.
After they reopened.
Yes. So because I talk with academics from Bilgi and they were crazy and they say now that Erdogan reopens it. So, but we have to talk very, very much about Mavinatan, about what we call in Greece Ghalazia Patrida, because there is the bill that is going to be to be voted in the big parliament in Turkey. And in Greece, of course, there are reactions, huge, because they consider it a huge challenge that Turkey will come and challenge the 152, for example, islands and all, all those things that are included in Mavi Natan, in the Blue Homeland. So why right now Mr. Erdogan is going to vote this to pass for vote this bill for Mavinatan at this specific moment, and what do you believe it will include? Because the people who worked on it are saying that, first of all, the name Mavinatan will not be included, and second, that there will not be all the things that are casus belli will not be in this new law. So why now, and what will it include? Will be a challenge for Greece? We will have a hot summer?
I think we're going to have a hot summer, no doubt about that. Simply because I don't think that this action by Turkish parliament and the government together is not without a foundation. Because what we have seen recently is that Greece is reasserting the fact that it is going to extend territorial waters to 12 miles. And that's, as you know, is a casus belli, as declared long ago by Turkish parliament. It still stands. And because they are using, marine park argument as well. And also they are going to extend it in the Adriatic. But as we all know, the main root of the problem between Turkey and Greece is
Adriatic, but Adriatic is not something that has to do with Turkey, I guess.
Exactly. No, it has not. But so Greece is saying that
Turkey should not have a word on that, on Adriatic. We are talking now about the Aegea.
No, what Greece is saying, the ministers are saying, we have done it in Adriatic, so we're going to do the same thing in the Aegean Sea as well. And Turkey has no right to oppose to that. We know the consequences of 12 miles. Turkey will have no access. Turkish ships leaving the Sea of Marmara, coming all the way to Aegean and entering Mediterranean Sea. If 12 miles will apply, Turkey will have no maneuver at all. Therefore, the UN law on the sea, Sea of Law, Turkey is not part to that, has a special status for the islands. So this is a long-standing problem. But if Greece is going to take a unilateral action on that, Turkey has to, of course, respond to that. This is, I think, one way of seeing why this legislation is coming to fore right now.
It was an argument from Greece, and we know very much the differences that the two countries have, the conflicts and the casus belli. But why now Turkey? Okay, there are arguments from both sides, but why right now, at this moment, Turkey wants to provoke, in a way, Greece, to challenge Greece with voting this bill about the Blue Homeland? Why at this moment, that at the same moment, it cancelled also the main opposition party? Why is it wants Mr. Erdogan at this moment to cause such a crisis with Greece?
I think reasons are simple, as far as I can see. One is that in East Mediterranean, now we see a consolidation of a front against Turkey by Greece, South Cyprus, and Israel. And we also see a militarization of the islands because some of them have, as you know, demilitarized status. This was the condition by which Italy, as well as the 1947 Treaty of Paris, agreed to give the islands to Greece. And then the US of also consolidating its military bases, both in mainland as well as in the islands. So Turkey sees as a threat here.
You mean the alliance with Israel and with Cyprus? This is and mainly with Israel.
Yeah, Israel. In Cyprus, this seems to be a major threat because some of the missile systems have been installed there in Cyprus. And we also had, as a result of the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz and Iran, American and French military buildup started to increase in Cyprus. Then also joint exercises, military exercises, all of them targeting Turkey somehow. Then you also have the militarization of islands, which were normally demilitarized, changing the status quo in the Aegean. So Turkey is, we like it or not, taking some reciprocal steps in order to balance what's happening there. Therefore, in my opinion, that's the reason why we have I haven't seen the legislation that you mentioned yet. I also heard about it, the Blue Homeland legislation. And so I think if the parties start talking again as they did in Ankara, in Athens, Erdogan and Mitsotakis, I think the situation could be easily called off. Again, we could return to status quo where both sides will not pose a threat to each other. However, if you take on the Greek side unilateral steps, I think Turkey will respond in kind.
Because, you know, when it started the discussion about the bill for the Mavinatan, for the Blue Homeland, at the same moment, it was there were reports that there was violations of the EEZ of Greece, etc. I don't know what. So you foresee a very warm summer, despite both sides expect much from the tourist period.
True. Both sides need peace, tranquility, but both sides should pay attention to the fact that they shouldn't upset the balance, status quo in the agency. I think what I also see that European Union, US to a certain extent, are taking steps closer to Greece. Historically, both EU and US were following a balanced status. But since Cyprus and Greece are now full member of the EU, naturally, they have to stand behind Greece, and Greece is using its position, making Turkish-Greek bilateral dispute a Turkish-EU dispute. And because I remember very well the accession negotiations of Greece, and at that time, EU made it very clear to Turkey that bilateral issues will never be affecting Turkish-EU relations. But to the contrary, what we see is that most of the actions and decisions on the EU side have been vetoed or blocked by South Cyprus and Greece. That creates also a tension on the part of Ankara, and believing that the EU cannot be an honest broker in that case, and it has become a party. Therefore, again, Turkey feels that, right or wrong, of course we can discuss that, is feeling that it has to protect its own national interests alone. And at whatever cost, because this is a national security matter for Turkey. It's not a simple political issue.
You know, because when an average Greek who doesn't know nothing about, you know, the technical terms, etc., listens to that the Mavinatan, the Blue Homeland, challenges 152 or I don't know islands of Aegean, which were always Greek, etc., they become crazy and they say, "What is happening? What are the Turks are going to do?" But the thing is that despite Greece blocks Turkey from the SAFE program, for example, which is for the defense architecture,
European defense architecture.
Turkey is too smart and deviates it, having contracts for defense issues with UK and now with France, I read, and with Italy. So always Mr. Erdogan finds a way to deviate, like the Turkish-Libyan treaty he did, for example. So do you believe that the Turkish-Libyan treaty will be included in the new law for Mavinatan, for the Blue Homeland?
Well, I think, Turkey has bilateral links with Libya, with Egypt, with Lebanon, now with Syria. And it was about to have a similar deal with Israel before the 9 October catastrophic situation, and also with Greece. So I think these are the issues which bilaterally parties can solve. We have to exist here. Turkey has the longest coastal line in the East Mediterranean than any other nation. And therefore, it's a huge power, economically, politically, militarily.
Indeed.
And therefore, any attempt to exclude Turkey from East Med will backfire, because Turkey could be a constructive partner, but also a spoiling partner if it's not included. Therefore, the smart thing will be, of course, each nation, including Greece, wouldn't like to sacrifice its sovereignty,
Exactly.
its own sovereign rights. I mean, this is quite normal. The same goes for Turkey, the same goes for Israel, Egypt, and others. Therefore, I think we have to find an agreeable solution, which you cannot satisfy everybody, of course, but at least have some common denominators.
But we don't see that they have the, they want to find this solution at this moment when they're going to vote for the blue homeland, and with the tensions that are being generally created. So do you believe that Mr. Erdogan is doing what he's doing lately because he feels that in Middle East he's not the biggest player, the protagonist like he used to be before the beginning of Iran war? Because with Syria, of course, he was the leader of the scene over there. But right now, we see that, for example, Pakistan is the main mediator, and that Turkey does not exist in the chess that is being played right now in Middle East. Do you think that he's nervous for that, and that's why he reacts against Greece? He reacts against his inner political opposition.
Well, I don't agree with you on that matter, because Pakistan, yes, is the main mediatory power right now for the crisis in Iran. However, Pakistan is not alone there. Behind Pakistan is China.
China, yes.
China has the power to affect any decision that will be taken either by Iran or Saudi Arabia or other Gulf nations. And that's the reason why things move from Geneva to Muscat, Muscat to Istanbul, now to Pakistan. But this doesn't mean that Turkey plays a critical role behind the scenes. Sometimes more credible and influential roles are played behind the scenes. You don't need to make noise about it. And if you look at the Middle Eastern map right now, all the way from Afghanistan to Morocco, Turkey, alongside Israel, is the largest power to reckon with. There is no other country. I mean, Egypt is more or less neutralized, Saudi Arabia so. Iran and Iraq, Syria have been militarily incapacitated by Israel. And now I think in the region, there are only two powers, Israel and Turkey, to reckon with. Sooner or later, I believe, Turkey and Israel will talk to each other. Americans will also, I think, encourage that. Therefore, when you say that Turkey is no longer visible or powerful in the region, I don't think that this reflects the actual situation, because Erdogan and Trump also have a special chemistry between themselves, and they are talking to each other once a week almost. Likewise, there is no other country in the world speaking at the same time to Washington, Brussels, Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, and Riyadh.
This is real, yes.
Therefore, I think Turkey has a strong role to play. It doesn't matter whether there's so much noise created about it. I don't think this could be linked to Mavi Vatan legislation that you are referring to. As far as I can read, this legislation is a direct response to what Greece is trying to do. Create some fait accompli in terms of 12 miles, in terms of military acts to be extended in the region against Turkey, in terms of also militarizing Greek islands in contravention of the international treaties. Therefore, if there is no attempt coming from the Greek side, taking also EU, France also one member behind it, this wouldn't have happened, in my opinion.
The Turkish side, always reads the sovereignty issues of Greece in a different way than the Greeks. So we will not now fight about this, and we will move on to the very, very crucial...
But before moving, let me make another point, because I'm a good friend of Greece. I'm
Yes,
also
I know.
a strong believer of Turkish-Greek relations, irrespective of who is in power. And I think the Treaty of Lausanne, 1923, is a very strong foundation. We should not make any attempt to disturb it or upset the balance that this treaty has established. If this is done, it will work into the hands of ultra-nationalists, both in Turkey and in Greece. Because thanks to this treaty, I think there is a very good balance established between the two countries. If we try to violate it or change it, I don't think it's going to work for both nations. My hope is that we should respect, in today's world, international law is nothing, as we know. If you look at the actions of Russia or the United States, international law has been shelved. And I think between our countries, we should respect both sovereign rights as well as the international law. Otherwise, it's going to be a law of Amazons that nobody will take care. And this is going to lead to tensions and conflicts that we don't want.
I agree with you. I'm not an expert in Greek-Turkish relationships in these fields, but from what for the big icon, I can tell that mostly till now, Mr. Erdogan was rising the tones. And Mr. Erdogan was challenging Greece, but now we leave that because we have to move to the Washington and Beijing meeting, the great summit between Xi and Donald Trump, which is very, very important. And you wrote in an article, in a great analysis, because we must admit that and repeat that you are one of the best experts internationally in energy and geopolitics. You are saying that they are the new G2. Why you don't include India, for example, or Europe, which is a huge economy, and you say that this is the G2? Do you think that the game is being played by only between Washington and Beijing?
Well, in the past, you remember during the Cold War era, we had G2 as well, Soviet Union and the United States. And it was absolute G2. Mm-hmm. All other countries were either satellites, and then you had the non-aligned movement led by India as well. It wasn't so effective. In today's world, it's more or less a multipolar world. And it's not like Cold War era. There are no strong alliances, even between US and European Union, as we have seen, decoupling. And NATO has been, to a certain extent, weakened by Trump's actions. And so what we have today is two superpowers, economically speaking, US and China. Mm-hmm. If you look at the technology, again, China alone, are more powerful in technology than US and European Union combined, if you look at the figures. In energy, in geopolitics, space, oceans. Whereas European Union, I'm a graduate of Collège d'Europe. I work a lot on European Union matters. And we always call EU as an economic giant, but political dwarf. As we have seen in the Strait of Hormuz and other places, Europe doesn't appear on the radar at all. And because it's an economic union, it hasn't become a geopolitical power. Perhaps if Turkey joins one day EU, which I don't think will happen in our lifetime, then also perhaps UK joining again after Brexit, then EU might emerge again as a geopolitical power. Right now, it is not. India is on the way to become the world's third largest economy, but politically it's not so strong either. Russia, where I came from 2-3 days ago, I was with Putin's key advisors, Karaganov particularly, and also Dmitry Trenin, and they are the ideologues of the Putin regime, and where they see themselves as moving more and more towards East rather than Europe. And with China, India, and other Asian nations, and Turkey also included in this Eurasianist perspective. If Turkey is treated as a second-rate country in EU and in relations with US, I think naturally Turkey will turn more and more towards Eurasia, where the power is shifting towards. I think it will be a loss. It will be a loss for EU. It will be a loss for United States, because NATO is losing its appeal as well. I personally believe that Article 5 will never work. and, one for all for one. And in light of what we have seen, and there's going to be a NATO summit coming up in Ankara, as you know, in July, where we hope
Yes, July.
Trump was going to come, but I don't think he's going to come now because he's seriously considering even withdrawal from NATO. Then if we have also losing our common defense alliance, which brings Greece and Turkey together, I think it's going to be a very dangerous world. And so we are not business as usual mode. Things are changing very fast. I believe that Greece and Turkey should unite forces and work together, because if Turkey is decoupled from Europe or the West in general, moving more and more towards East, I don't think Greece will feel more safe and comfortable.
So, because we were talking about the Trump Xi summit, which is the result, the main result, the most important outcome from their summit? What would you say? And in which sector? Because they talked about trade, technology, finance, about energy security, critical minerals, artificial intelligence, sea lanes, and supply chains. These were the main topics of their conversations. So, which is the conclusion? Who is the winner from this summit?
I think it's very simplistic to call who is going to win and who is going to lose. And I can see from the Chinese perspective, because I speak Mandarin and I work as a diplomat in China a long time. Chinese are very smart. This is a civilization of 5,000 years. When they negotiate with anybody, politically, business-wise, or military, they are very patient. Time is always on their side. They have seen what happened in the Strait of Hormuz with US. US military was not strong enough to defeat Iran, which showed enormous resilience, supported probably by China and Russia behind the scenes, not publicly. And therefore, China is quite happy to see that US military power has been somehow losing credibility. While theirs are on the rise because they have this peaceful rise strategy to 2049, until then, they don't want any conflict. They want to focus on their internal development, competitiveness, and also creating a military which is powerful to resist and, if necessary, attack. If they are attacked by anybody else, respond effectively. And therefore, China is, in my opinion, the biggest winner here, because they also got a word from Trump that thousands of miles away, next to us, you want to defend Taiwan? Be our guest. And I think Americans understood this very well, that China, whenever they wish, they can intervene militarily and take over Taiwan. And US is not going to intervene. And they haven't done this in Ukraine, in Europe, they don't want to do it. And why should they do it in Taiwan? Of course, there are reasons why they will be pushed to do it. But Chinese got the first-hand assurance that Taiwan issue, which is very close to their heart, is the national security matter. Trump is not going to create any problem on Taiwan. However, as G2, I think behind the doors, which are not leaked to media or public, they agreed on a couple of things, including on Iran. Because I understand from Rubio, Secretary of State, that on Monday, they are going to announce probably a peace deal, which Iranian foreign minister said, well, it's not imminent yet. But there are some movements in that regard, because Chinese also have a strong interest for the Strait of Hormuz to be reopened. And nuclear negotiations will start again. Again, the Americans got assurance from China in return that Chinese don't want a nuclear Iran either. They want nuclear proliferation agreement to be respected. So does, I'm sure, Russia. On trade matters, I think the American approach is not wrong, because they have a huge trade deficit with China, and they have to balance this out. And technology-wise, they recognize how much progress Chinese have made, and they have to compete. So if you remember, in Trump's first term, China was characterized as an enemy, hostile power. Right now, in the new national security documents and strategy, China is defined as systemic rival or systemic competitor. So two different things. It's no longer enemy, it's a competitor. I think that's a positive development.
So would you say that the Iranians play good chess regarding the Strait of Hormuz, and which is the real cost till now, from the beginning of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, for the global economy, and especially who are the biggest victims of the closure, and if the damage that has been done can be restored?
You remember that Strait of Hormuz was never among the contentious issues between the United States and Iran.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we had in our lap the problem with Strait of Hormuz and whether it's closed or open.
Yes.
Therefore, now Iranians gained a leverage on that. They want to have a international assurance that their sovereignty will be recognized on the Strait of Hormuz. And secondly, the biggest, I think, casualty is the world energy markets, because 20% of the world's crude oil was coming from the Gulf nations, and 22% LNG coming from UAE and Qatar. And these are now somehow locked in the Strait of Hormuz, and there is a very limited passage. And as a result, supply crunch we are experiencing. The prices went up, and we are going to have what economists call stagflation. That means low growth and high inflation. And this is going to not go away very soon, because we are going to live with this for a long time to come. And more importantly, I think Gulf nations have lost their credibility as main suppliers of crude and LNG. Everybody is looking around alternatives, alternative sources, but also alternative routes. And Turkey here as well has an advantage, because especially Iraqi oil, 85% of them produced in the south of Iraq, in Basra. Perhaps if a pipeline is built from Basra to Kirkuk, then unite with the existing infrastructure to Ceyhan, Turkey, and Turkey could be one of the main alternative routes. And there are other ideas, of course, floating around, but the increasingly insurance and freight costs are increasing. EU will be terribly affected by that, because it's not only Strait of Hormuz, but also Bab el-Mandeb, which are under the threat of the Yemeni, Yemeni rebels, Houthis. Then, as you know, most of the goods coming and commodities coming from Asia Pacific through Bab el-Mandeb, Red Sea, Suez, entering Mediterranean. Now all the ships have to go through Horn of Africa, another 2-3 weeks, and another 40% cost and delays. So I think we are not going to have the old world again, business as usual. Things will dramatically change. We live in a new world where not only geopolitics of resources, but also geopolitics of flow is very important, and strategic choke points like Malacca Strait, Hormuz, Bab el-Mandeb, Turkish Straits, as well as Panama and Arctic route. So we have to rethink all our old concepts and adapt them to the new realities in the world.
And a new world order, a totally new world order. But you refer
new world disorders. I don't think we will have order for a long time to come.
Exactly. So you refer to the Cold War era. So do you believe that technology is the new Cold War weapon?
It is. Because no longer it's going to be F-16s, F-35, or S-400 and Patriot missiles. Now, as we see in many warfares, drones are more effective. You use also trade, technology, energy, water wars, and currency warfare between nations, sanctions, compliance. These are more effective than tanks crossing the borders. Therefore, we have to understand very well what the new instruments of war are. And therefore, I mean, again, coming back to Turkey, Greek, we are spending billions of dollars on both sides of the Aegean, because we are afraid of each other. We think that Turkey will attack Greece, Greece will do this, that. And as a result, we are wasting billions of dollars on weaponry to the pleasure of Americans and Europeans. However, this weaponry will not be of great use because, one drone costing you $10,000 may be more effective than a fleet of F-35 if you want, or cyber attacks in today's world, if digitalize all your infrastructure and power system. Therefore, I think our concept of defense, war, and military will have to change. It's no longer the same concept that we use up to now.
So I wanted to ask right now if you can reveal us something from your close exchanges you had with the Russian advisors of Vladimir Putin. I mean, will he continue the war? Is he gaining from the closure of Hormuz? I mean, because a lot could buy again from him energy. So what is your sense about Ukraine, which is a front that continues and nobody knows if it will end, when it will end?
I think I had three clear messages I received in Moscow, mainly from Karaganov. He is the main advisor to Putin on defense and security matters. And also, as I said, Dmitry Trenin. He's also, these two gentlemen are like Kissinger's and Brzezinski of the modern world in the Western world. And one is that West cannot be trusted. Therefore, we are not European. Our future is in the East, in Asia. And they made a clear decision on that. On Ukraine, clearly they believe that this has been instigated by the West. We like it or not. And because the efforts to incorporate Georgia and Ukraine into NATO, despite all the repeated warnings coming from Putin all along, and they believe that the war in Ukraine will finish quickly in the period ahead.
Really?
And
during 2026?
Yes, this year is going to be concluded. And because they have advised Putin to use the nuclear deterrence effectively. And not only in words, but in actions. They have installed tactical nuclear missiles in the territories of Belarus and on the border with Poland. And they made it very clear to Americans and Europeans that, if you continue that, supporting Ukraine against us, and also NATO constituting a threat, we will use tactical nuclear missiles. And they are very serious about it. There is no joking on that. I think we have to take it very seriously. And I believe, from what I heard, that both Europeans and the Americans understood that clearly. That's the reason why Trump pursues a policy and asking Ukraine to make some concessions to reach a deal as soon as possible. And they think that there is a marriage of convenience with China. They are not great friends, great allies. It's not emotions. It's the mutual interest of both nations. And so long as there is hostility towards both of them from the West, they will act together, clearly. Russia will also provide a nuclear umbrella to China. China has its own nuclear missiles and nuclear warheads, but not as sophisticated as the ones in Russia. So Russia will provide that. And they believe that, I think, countries in Eurasia should be working together more closely. And I think we can expect a new initiative coming from Russia about Eurasia, a Eurasia club or whatever, like a Valdai club that they have, and bringing together Turkey, Russia, India, Iran, Pakistan, Central Asian republics, Indonesia, and others, Korea perhaps. But they will also have US and EU as observers, and they want to create a new reality on the ground. And it's not a political military organization against the West, but they want to have a clear control of what they want to achieve in Eurasia. And it's going to be led, of course, by Russia. And initially, it's not going to be a political or governmental organization. It's going to be a body, quasi-institutional body that will bring the best minds in Eurasia space, interacting also with their counterparts in the West. So, as I said, this is a new world. Of course, you have the BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and many other new institutional structures, Global South, coming together. In the past, there was a phrase, West and the rest. Now the rest is getting organized against the West somehow to strike the right balance. So here, where Turkey will sit is an interesting question. And on Greece, I also want to tell you something that I heard in Moscow. And they don't have a great trust in Greece or Cyprus right now, believing that these two nations, countries, have become extremely anti-Russia. Right or wrong, but that's the feeling and perception that I detected in Moscow. I think it's important for Greece and Cyprus also to act in such a way that they will not be seen as hostile powers to Russia, because we have to work together. Nobody can condone what Russia has done in Ukraine. We don't accept it, of course. This is something else, but we have to also recognize legitimate security concerns of Russia. And there is a huge misunderstanding of each other. Therefore, we need to create new bridges to make sure that Moscow understands us and we understand Moscow, to avoid any future conflict.
So you should talk to Prime Minister Mitsotakis for that issues, to advise him, because
very happy to do so.
Because he takes the decisions, and he decided to make this alliance, strong alliance with Israel, with Ukraine, etc., and to take distances from the Palestinians and from Russia. So, Mr. Oujou, I could talk with you for many hours.
And there is also a religious element here. Mm-hmm. And in Russia, there's a patriarch, of course, of Orthodox Church.
Of course.
And then we have the patriarch in Istanbul, Fener Orthodox Patriarch.
Of course.
And they think that the West is using also churches to divide, because the Orthodox world, which includes Russia, Ukraine, Serbia, Greece, Armenia, Georgia, Bulgaria, and are divided among themselves, and they should not be used for political purposes. Also, they were telling me. I don't know much about it, but this was the sentiment I detected among the Russians.
Historically, the churches were behaving like politicians all the time, and were making politics and were ambitious on that field.
Yes.
So we could talk for hours. You are one of the most interesting people I had as a guest for an interview. I thank you so much, Mr. Oujou, and I hope we will again in the forthcoming future.
My pleasure.
We will talk. I thank you so much.
With pleasure, always. Thank you for this opportunity.